Okay. You ready, Stephen? Okay, we'll call a special town council meeting to order. Roll call.
Smith.
Adams.
That's it.
Woods. Tonight, we're gonna do the presentation of the USDA RD Letter of Conditions for the funding of the wastewater project. At this time, I'll turn it over to the representatives from the USDA RD to explain the letters of conditions, and then we'll ask them questions and move on, so.
You bet, thanks.
Good evening, everyone. Those who don't know me, I'm Lyle Twenty. I'm with Rural Development. I got involved with this project through Dan, and this is kind of like a training project for me, because this is the first time exposure I've had to the water and environmental programs that Rural Development has. Anyhow, so I took over this project that Dan had started with Randy and the town of Hot Springs, and so that's how I became involved. I'm out of the Kalispell area office. This is actually Dan's territory, out of the Missoula office. And so my job is to get the grant up and going, or the loan grant up and going to the application phase. And so when I started reviewing all this, there was a lot of information that I started going through the file, and I'm starting to question, like, okay, there's some issues here that aren't fully explained, and I've got to research these and find out what's what. We went through, did all the underwriting and all the analysis. What we came out with was that the total project was going to run $1,052,000. Randy had originally put this in at what, $944,000, and if I recall correctly, it was like $216,000 loan and some RD grant, and there was TSEP funding. But when we started looking at this, there were some issues that came up. What we ended up with is an RD loan of $440,000, rural development grant of $435,000, the applicant funding of $74,000, and other funding, which is the Treasure State Endowment Program, and that's $103,000. And that comes up to a total of $1,052,000. In the revised budget, after everything had been considered, there was $11,000 included in the budget that won't be there, and that was for interim interest to fund the construction. Because this loan is under $500,000, which means rural development can go ahead and advance directly. Okay, so that saves you $11,000 there. Now, the letter that we have prepared, and the letters have gotten longer, and this has just been a recent change. I think these things are almost like 40-some pages long now, but our program director is nice enough, he cut it back to 21 pages. So it saves you quite a bit of bureaucracy in between there. It really doesn't apply to a lot of small communities. Now the letter establishes conditions which must be understood and agreed to by you, which means the town of Hot Springs, before further consideration may be given to your application. The funding will be administered on behalf of the Rural Utilities Service by the state and area staff of USDA Rural Development, both of which are referred to throughout this letter as the agency. Any changes in project cost, source of funds, scope of project, or any other significant changes in the project or applicant must be reported to and concurred by the agency with written amendment to this letter. If significant changes are made without obtaining such concurrence, the agency may discontinue processing of the application. So what this means is there's going to be a lot of communication back and forth here, that if the town gets more grant funds or gets a forgivable loan, we need to be made aware of that, because we've got to go back in and re-underwrite the loan and the grant to see where everything's at. Now you have to meet all the conditions necessary to start construction within 36 months. And the reason why they want you to start within 36 months is because after that, then the construction costs that have been presented, they increase, and you're going to have additional costs in there. If you agree to meet the conditions set forth in this letter and desire further consideration be given to your application, please complete and return the following forms within 14 days. This letter was dated May 11th, and so it's got to be done by the 25th, which is tomorrow. So we have a letter of intent to meet obligations and a request for obligation of funds. And the obligation of funds, of course, is for the $440,000 loan and the $435,000 grant. Funds will be considered approved from the date the 1940-1 request for obligation of funds is signed by our program director, which will be tomorrow, if the town does sign for it. Anyone have any questions so far? Okay. If anyone has a problem or question, just kind of raise your hand and I'll.
Is there penalty that goes with the signing of the contract with the agency for alternative funding development?
What do you mean? You mean if the town gets additional funding?
And would secure grants, yes, would they be obligated for the R&D involved in putting together the package?
No. What happens here is, I'll get into this later on, but every time we re-underwrite this, we have to take that additional grant money or forgivable loan that the town will get, and then this will go back, we'll reassess the loan and the grant funds. So that's how critical this plays. It could even be just a $50,000 grant, and that could change something in the mix somewhere too. Okay, so I'll get to that in here, how that applies. That's kind of addressed later on.
Part two, if they do come up with grant funding, is the USDA still riding herd on the project, so to speak, or are they out of the picture completely?
Well, no, we're the major funder of this project.
Right, but if they wind up not funding the project, is the city of Hot Springs obligated to USDA in any way?
Only if they draw money. Okay. Okay, the project detail, and Jeff and Ryan, if you want to kind of say anything else here, I'm just going to kind of highlight what I can get out of the project. If there's anything else that I missed, just let me know. Basically, the project's going to consist of rehabilitating existing collection lines, waterproof sewer manhole covers to minimize infiltration and inflow, install a grinder auger at the lift station, waterproof control panel and dry well entrance cover at the lift station, install flow measurement devices to measure effluent inflow at the lift station and treated effluent outflow at the weir. Repair support blocks for aeration distribution lines, repair one aeration motor, replace or repair inoperable interlagoon valves, replace existing weir with an appropriate sized weir, and install a dechlorination system. Did I get everything on there? I think so. Okay. Facilities will be designed and constructed in accordance with sound engineering practices and must meet the requirements of federal, state, and local agencies. Proposed facility design must be based on a preliminary engineering report as concurred by the agency. And so far, they've concurred the initial one that you submitted. Project schedule, debt authorization. Debt must be, vote and approval of the debt must be completed within 180 days of this letter. So.
Say that again?
That's on your dechlorination station.
Right.
What are you going to use that for?
So right now, the town chlorinates the effluent out of the lagoons to kill bacteria before it's discharged to the creek. They have regulations as to you can't discharge the bacteria, but you also can't discharge too much chlorine. And so right now, the town has to walk a fine line between too much chlorine and not enough. So with the dechlor, they can chlorinate to a high level dechlorinate, and then discharge, and so it just makes it easier to comply with the.
That way they ensure they're getting the kill on the bacteria, but also meet the chlorine limits.
I'd like to
Just
make
waste
I used to work in sewer plants, in California. And there's this new type of thing they're using, it was a little tiny fish that would literally just bring the pH down very low. You might want to look into it. It's a lot cheaper to feed a fish than it would be to buy some of that chlorinated stuff. Then again, it might get into our water system fail. So, it could be quite a damaging effect on us.
Yeah. Okay.
Has Hot Springs had any violations of the Clean Water Act because of our discharge into the creek?
Well, it kind of goes into a real long process how they determine that. There's some, first of all, you gotta be able to measure what your inflows to the system are. And you've gotta be able to measure your outflows of the system. And part of that is
Has there been any violations?
There were a couple of isolated violations, and it's a permit, it's not with it's with the EPA.
The reason why I asked the question is a while back, a long time ago, I found an online article, a series of articles written by the New York Times called Toxic Waters. And they had all these lists of towns that had cities in the US that had violated the Clean Water Act. And there was a whole bunch of them here for Hot Springs, Montana, and I was shocked. So I wanted to ask the question.
they'll pick up, whatever they want to, they'll say like, well, hey, look, this little town out here has got 2 of them in the last year. Well,
Well, if Hot Springs was even on the list, or whatever this survey that she read about it, still, isn't there like a median for Thompson Falls, Plains, Superior, all the places around here, and then a median of the level of whatever it is we're measuring, and then a median for its price too?
well, Jeff knows more how that's.
The reason we're doing the project is to make sure you're in compliance with the Clean Water Act. That's one of the goals of the project.
And you have a discharge permit specific to the town of Hot Springs.
Yeah.
So, so if anything that is too high, when they come back and test the waters, is it because we've done something, or made a mistake, or overlooked something, or is it because it didn't matter when you were offering these things and then it happened and then are we the...
After the improvements are made, the town is still owns and operates the system.
So what the improvements will do is they'll allow you to chlorinate to a level to ensure you get your kill on bacteria. But the dechlor system that would be installed would then allow you to make sure that you can meet that chlorine residual on your discharge. But the town is still ultimately responsible for the operation of the system.
Okay.
Mary has a question. Mary?
Well, I have several questions about the project description, so I'm wondering, Lyle, if you want to kind of maybe go through the first however many pages you want to just get done, that we can maybe come back to that. And-
Yeah, we just need to kind of get this thing, keep this moving along because.
I would like to come back to that, but I don't want to interrupt.
Okay, we'll keep this thing back on track then. Okay, Tom's gonna be responsible for establishing the rates and charges for the.
Could you go back to, you got interrupted at the very last thing you said before all the people spoke.
Debt authorization, all required notice and vote and approval of the debt must be completed within 180 days of the date of this letter. So that means, November 11th, 2016, you need to have the vote approved and, the debt must be completed and authorized. Okay?
You talk about the loan then?
Yeah.
Okay. That's a separate function?
Yeah.
That's a separate act?
That's a separate act.
Actually, we're gonna ask you to do the loan resolution tonight.
Yeah.
So that, in other words,
That's it.
that'll already be done too, so we would just wait until that time.
The thing that, the next step, part B, is gonna be the one that's gonna take a little time to enact.
Yeah.
the Rates and charges.
And you said the project is approved basically once once you have a request or obligation of funds?
Right.
It's automatically approved?
Letter, well, pretty much so, the funds have been reserved for the project. Okay. Construction schedule, the project is required to begin no later than 36 months from the date of this funding offer. So that means it has to start by May 11th, 2019. If the project goes more than 36 months, you need to get approval prior to the 36-month expiration date and get our approval to go for another 24 months. At which time we'll end up re-underwriting the loan because construction costs more than likely will have increased by that time. And the next page, on page 3, we have the estimated project advertisement for bid. Jeff helped me out with this. We didn't really have a lot of concrete dates set in place on this. We had a few that we knew of that Randy had talked about. And the estimated project advertisement for bid will be in February of 2017. The estimated bid opening date will be a month later on March 15th, 2017.
And Lyle, just real quick, just so everybody understands, the reason we propose doing it this way would be to have it ready to bid early next year, so you're getting the best prices from contractors as they're hungry and starting to set up their work for the year. That's why we schedule it that way.
And how do you advertise that? How do you get that out there?
Newspapers, we put it on our website.
Normal.
We actually call contractors and we'll try and advocate for the town and get as much interest as we can from local contractors.
I'd like to make a suggestion, investing in ourselves instead of going into contractors that are outside the area. I think there's people here that need jobs that could work and could do the job, and you could have it inspected later, you see, to pass code. What do you think of that?
And if there's enough qualified people to do the work in the area.
Well, no, we can't do it that way. It has to be an open and free competition according to federal procurement regulations.
I just thought we'd be able to take the money and put it back into the city.
That would be nice, but
Instead of trying to put it outside.
Government
It makes more
requires
sense to me to put it inside the boundaries here.
Well, if it's open, then it means anybody, so if there's some people that are open and ready and able to do this job out of town, from this town, then wouldn't they be part of the decision in who does the job?
Well,
they can bid on it.
they can bid on it.
Fair trade, yeah.
Okay, now the estimated notice of receipt date, which we'll get from the engineer, is March 29th, 2017. And the number of contract days that Jeff and I kind of threw back and forth, we said, we ended up with 77 days. And so that would take the estimated substantial completion date to 6/14/2017. And then the final inspection of the project would be on July 28th, 2017. And then the engineering schedule, the owner's notice to the engineer to proceed to the design would be July of 2016. Begin design by the engineer in August of 2016, and the final design would be presented to the town on October of 2016. So that would give them plenty of time to get out there for the, decide, what any changes they want to make to these plans. The project funding sources, the funding source is the applicant contribution of $74,000. Now this includes, in talking to our program director when we talked about this, is that the $74,000 will include the town paying off the, the SRF loan that you have?
Yes.
And then that will also include paying off the computer loan that you have.
Yes.
And so then the balance of that, difference of that would be what the town would need to come up with. And then Julie and I talked about these reserve accounts. There's some of those that have to be gone back through.
Right.
And you can pick up some funds from there. So we think that's a very doable situation. The Treasury State Endowment Fund, which has already been awarded, that's $103,000. The Rural Utilities loan will be $440,000, and the grant will be $435,000. for a total of $1,052,000. And the project budget, the audit will be $3,000, legal fees of $5,000, bond costs of $12,000, engineering of $177,000, administration for $20,000, construction of $759,000, and the project contingency of $76,000. And that comes up to a total of $1,052,000.
Don't you think that's a little extravagant?
Or what?
For what you're doing, you're just replacing manholes.
Well, there's more to it than that. There's more to it than that. We're going out replacing manholes. There's labor, there's time, and there's engineering costs involved.
The project hasn't been bid yet. These construction costs are estimates based on what we've seen across the state. For similar work, past experience, similar projects in the state of Montana, ultimately that construction cost would be determined at the time we open bids. It's an estimate for planning numbers, for a planning number at this point. We can't know the construction cost until we bid the project, right?
$1 million.
You're starting to look familiar around here, but for
Sure.
the people that don't know the record, could you just introduce yourself and say what you're from and what your role, you know,
Sure.
brief?
My name's Ryan Jones. I'm with Morrison Merrily, the engineering firm that's working with the town. I'm the vice president of Morrison Merrily, and I manage our Kalispell operation. And Jeff Season's with me. He's also obviously out of our Kalispell office. And Jeff would be the lead design engineer on this project.
So I do have to say, thank you to Jeff for his quick work in getting some of this work done, because without his work, the loan amount could have been very, very high, quite a bit higher. We went back through and did some recalculation of what they call equivalent dwelling units that affects the rates on this project. And without that help, this loan would have been substantially higher. It would have been more than triple, is where this would have come out. So he's done an excellent job, and I appreciate his help on this so far. Now, moving on, any changes in funding sources that we've talked about following the obligation of agency funds must be reported by the processing, or to the processing official, so that'll, when Dan gets his loan back, he'll be the one who'll have to report that to. And the project feasibility and other funding will be reassessed if there's a significant change in project costs after bids are received. So then, after we receive the bids, then it'll be another period of, we'll have to go back and we'll have to reassess this. Loan and grant terms, repayment, basically interest rate will be the lower the rate in effect at the time of the loan approval or the time of the loan closing unless you request otherwise. Should the interest rate be reduced, the payment will be recalculated to the lower amount. Now the loan's a 40-year loan with monthly payments, so there's 480 equal monthly payments that begin 1 month after closing. Now for planning purposes, they're using a 1.75% interest rate and an amortization factor of 2.9, which provides for a monthly payment of $1,276. Payment will be established as the date of the loan closes. Security will be secured by a revenue bond with a first lien position in the amount of $440,000, registered to the United States of America, acting through the United States Department of Agriculture.
What is the lien on?
It's a revenue bond, so it's based upon the revenue that the city
What is the lien on?
The revenues of the system,
Oh, okay.
generates. So, take your
the
water and
cash
sewer
flow
bill.
of the
I see.
revenue system,
Yeah.
I mean the wastewater system.
Let's see, and then the bond and any ordinance or resolution relating thereto must not contain any provision in conflict with the agency loan resolution, applicable regulations, or its authorizing law. Must be no defeasance or refinancing clause in conflict with graduation requirements. Bond counsel must prepare for rural development the draft bond documents no less than 90 days before advertising for bid. So, additional security requirements are contained in the loan documents. Electronic payments, loan payments will come out automatic payment every month. Construction completion time frame. All projects are required to be completed and all funds dispersed within 5 years of obligation. Again, we talked about construction has to start within 36 months of the date of this letter. And if funds are not dispersed within 5 years of obligation, you have to submit a written waiver request explaining why extenuating circumstances beyond your control for an extension of time is warranted. Disbursement of agency funds not available until such time as the project has been bid and construction contracts have been signed.
Is this going to be in this, for this town? Is that what you have with people here? Is that what this is all about?
The town
Yes, this is
Springs.
for the town.
Yes, well, there's only about 250 people here.
440 users on the water system.
440? So, at 440 people, and you have $1 million debt.
Well, it's more,
Don't you think it's a little strange, I mean, saddling that much money into those few people?
That's only
I mean,
440,000.
think about it.
It's not enough.
I mean, it's gonna be kind of hardship on some
It's
people.
440,000.
the debt.
The debt is
Yeah.
A lot of it's grant.
But there's the interest rate too, it cures, and you're not
Well,
with
the
those
interest rate's
people, it's only a few people, you know, paying that out of their, it's not gonna, it doesn't make any sense as I see it, you see. There's not enough people to accumulate that much debt.
Okay, let's move on.
Okay. Disbursement, we talked about that. No interim financing is required. We talked about this a little bit earlier. Funds will be advanced as they are needed in the amounts necessary to cover the RD proportionate share of any disbursements required of your entity over 38 periods. So every month you can file a request for a draw against the loan. And the way that this works is the TSEP fund, your town's contribution and the TSEP funds, and then the rural development loan funds will go next, and then the last to be used will be the RD grant funds. Okay. And then he talks about, you know, if you have a construction account and it should be interest bearing, and if you earn so much over a certain amount per year on federal cash balances, and that amount over the $500 has to be remitted back to the government, which we hardly ever see. Reserves. There's a debt service reserve. And what this is you have to accumulate over a period of 10 years, 1 year's equivalent of payments. So every year every payment, you have to take 10% of that payment and accrue that towards the debt reserve account. And that adds $128 per month.
Is that a balloon payment or something?
No, that's every month. You just
Like savings.
take that, you put it into an account, and you accumulate that, and if
Where's
there's
the
any...
balloon payment at the end of the year?
No, that's
No.
in case you can't make your payment for some reason, those funds are available to make your payment.
I know we're really in a depression. The world's in a depression right now, and it's quite, it's quite serious, so it's something to think about.
Can that clause be waived from
No.
this letter?
That's a bond and federal requirement.
I believe that the coal companies had been granted the right to perhaps come up with the money, but they did not establish an account with the government. I would think that would maybe be something to be looked into.
No, it won't be changed. Short-lived asset reserve. Okay, in addition to the debt service reserve, you must establish a short-lived asset reserve fund. Based on the preliminary engineering report, I've got a list here of what they determined as short-lived assets in the time frame, and that comes up to $18,950 per year that has to be deposited to this account. You got those debt reserve accounts, you can kind of work with those and see where you need to be at. But what this account is used for is if there's any pumps or repairs that have to be made to the system, this is what they can tap into to pay for those repairs. Okay? Current assets can also be used to establish and maintain reserves for expected expenses, including but not limited to operation and maintenance, customer deposits, deferred interest during the construction period, and asset management program. Requirements prior to advertising for bids. At the conclusion of the proposal environmental review process, specific actions were negotiated with environmental regulatory officials to avoid or minimize environmental impacts. Following list of actions are required for successful completion of the project and must be adhered to during the project design and construction. There's mitigation that has to be maintained by the contractor. And then what was determined in the review by our environmental review coordinator for the state basically said that floodproofing was identified and the town is required to address the areas affected by the 500-year floodplain. This is regulation we have to take to heart because we're seeing what's happening with global warming. Everyone's up in arms. They don't know what's causing this. Okay, we got places that they're over their 500-year floodplain. So what this 500-year floodplain is determined from for this area, because the 500-year floodplain is not really mapped that well, and that stems from two problems. One, it's FEMA who does the mapping, and the second is they do not, on the majority of cases from what I determined in Montana, is they do not map the tribal reservations. But around the town of Hot Springs, they do have the 100-year floodplain elevation mapped, and the regulation goes on to state that the 500-year to floodproof above the 500-year floodplain, which is 3 feet above the 100-year floodplain. So what this entailed is Jeff going from a known elevation, determining what we needed to do for the floodproofing. And this raised the costs quite a bit. In the end, it was like $108,000 or something like that is what it raised the rates to. Now we've got the infiltration problem, and then what we have is you haven't made full determination yet, have you? Because you've got to go out and get some elevations on some of those manholes.
On the manhole lids, we don't know the exact elevations of them because we haven't surveyed them yet.
Yeah. We just went from a known elevation to minimize the cost to the town at this point. And this is all done based off known elevations. And so what they did was they determined that there were 48 manholes in town that needed to be repaired, and those were $12.50 per manhole. So that comes up to like, what, 60,000?
Yeah, that's an estimate again.
Yeah, and so we're just working with estimates, and then the control panel in the lift station, that may have to be raised, that's another 30,000. And then the entry hatch to the dry well at the lift station requires a watertight hatch, and there's not going to be any requirements for improvements at the lift station, or not, pardon me, at the lagoon at this point. The environmental review coordinator, we looked at what Jeff's evaluation was of the lagoons and the requirement there, and it was almost $400,000 of additional improvements that had to be done to the lagoon. So the environmental review coordinator exercised his authority and said, we're going to waive that at this point.
How large is this floodplain?
Quite large. In fact, the whole floodplain covers the entire town.
Well, in layman's terms,
This is 3,000 feet above sea level.
how likely is
How
it
could it be a floodplain?
It's a floodplain around Hot Springs
that we're
Creek
gonna,
that we're talking about.
Well, it's even 2,000 feet around a hot spring.
Remember when it flooded years ago, Joe?
And the only thing we have here is two water sources that could break, the dams could break. But that wouldn't even reach the town here if they did break.
Well, if the 3 dams upstream went,
Right? There's nothing, I don't think we have much of a problem here about flooding.
But we don't establish the 500-year floodplain, that's established by FEMA.
Well,
We do
yes,
have
of
to
course.
adhere to the regulations, the requirement.
Yes, of course.
Because
But
it's,
could they be wrong? Because my house is over 3,000 feet. just right over there. Over here, you know, it's, even at the lowest part, it's about 2,000 feet above sea level.
10 or 12 years ago, I wasn't here, but it just started raining on snow and stuff.
But one of the things that, and I guess we can let the engineers talk about it a little bit, but one of the things we have to worry about is infiltration into the sewer system. Just for instance, 2 years ago, we pumped 60,000 gallons of fresh water into the water system. One day's outflow through the lift station was just under 1 million gallons. That's how much infiltration water we're getting into the system. That's why we're doing this. I mean, and what that does, that costs you as ratepayers a lot of money, taking and pumping groundwater into the lagoons. It's causing lagoons to have problems and on and on and on. So that's what this project is doing, is trying to protect the system. So we're only dealing with the toilet flushing of the sink water and all that is that's where we're, and without doing this, you know, we can have all kinds of more problems, so.
Yeah, it could back up into your homes.
Oh, yeah, been there, done that, like really recently. So what is the major route that, you know, the flooding, water running everywhere issue? What is the main way that gets in the sewer? Is it the manhole lids? Or?
Yeah, the manhole lids are one source, and just any kind of lid that would leak in the sewer it leaks.
Well, and that's to go along with why we're lining the lines. I mean, we have, actually the manhole chimneys are old and rotted and cracked, so the groundwater's pouring in. Most of our main that comes down to the middle of town parallels Hot Springs Creek, and it's an old tile main. So some of the stuff that it wasn't redone when they redid the sewer system in '99 or whatever. So part of this project is relining them, so they can line it so the infiltration water can't come in. And we're working on really closely with making sure people are not putting their sump pumps into it, which we have handouts that we actually been putting door to door when the people are reading meters. We have rain gutters that are going into the sewer system. We're trying to find them. We find them all the time, and we help the customer get that out of there. I know there were some roof drains that went into the city sewer system. Rebecca's house did that before they redid the sewer there, where she's living. All those roof drains all went into the city sewer. So we're out there actively trying to stop the easy stuff. But what this project is taking care of is the manholes, and that's what they said, they're gonna shoot elevation. So they're gonna go on that side of town mainly, where you have the lows and stuff, where the creek, if it comes up any at all, is running water into those manholes. Or if you get a lot of rain or anything like that, like I said, the manhole chimneys, we have some that are right along the creek that are just pouring water in. I think one of our inflow tests there was the one was doing 200 gallon a minute. One of the chimneys down here by the creek. We're getting huge infiltration water. You start talking 200 gallons a minute, 60 minutes, an hour, and 24 hours a day. I mean, on a dry day, we're pumping almost 200,000 gallons of water out of the lift station, and we're putting in about 80 into the system. So that's how big infiltration. And then when we get wet weather, those numbers just go right up. Like I said, we had numbers just under the million mark a day. And we're putting 60 and 70,000 gallons of water in the system. So that's what this project is for. Part of it is for us to do that. The other part of it is, and I guess I can let the engineers talk about it, but we gotta get the debris out of the system. People are flushing stuff that's causing problems at the lagoons. So the screening plant is to take that out, it rings it, we put it in garbage cans, and it goes to the landfill. The other thing is, right now, is our control valving at the lifts, at the lagoons, we have 3 ponds, and we can't control those levels. The valving's all rotted out. It was put in 1983, and it's just gone. For instance, 2 years ago, we had a seam in one of the lagoon liners that had split open, so now the lagoon water is now going into the dike, and these are above ground lagoons, so they sit above ground. The water is going into the lagoon structure itself. What that can do is cause a blowout. They get super saturated, the whole side of the lagoon goes, and we're into a multi-million dollars to repair a lagoon and have to do it now. So we need to drop the lagoon level to fix to do the repair, which is no problem. Ruben has done a lot. We have the material, we have the expertise, have been to school to do it. We can't drop the lagoon level. We fought that for quite a while. We ended up out there with some big pumps pumping, trying to get that water down just enough so we could patch the problem. If our valving was there, all we'd have to do is shut that lagoon off, open up a drain into the other lagoon, drop the level, fix it, put the system back into operation, and we don't have that. The dechlorination, what we didn't talk about here is we're on a reservation. Town of Hot Springs answers to the EPA on the sewer system. We have a permit with the EPA, we answer to the tribe, this compares to Sage Kootenai tribes. We send monthly reports to them every month, to their people, and also we send it to the EPA, to the Denver office. The Denver oversees us. So we have an operating permit, it's specific to Hot Springs. Every EPA operating permit is specific to a town. We are in violation quite often in the winter, because of the geese that are living on our lagoons. We can't chlorinate enough, but then also in the summer sometimes we get in a little bit of violation. We have trouble keeping our chlorine levels down, where the dechlorination then takes that out, so that when that water does enter Hot Springs Creek, it's back to clean water. There's no chlorine in it for the animals that live in the watershed. So,
The brewer's yeast works pretty good for.
Janelle,
So this is off the subject, but it's been my experience on the north side of town that we don't have the proper culverting for the below grade properties. And so is there funding to help with that? So that there is water runoff? I mean, unfortunately, my property is one that becomes flooded from properties above it.
right,
So
we're
that-
working on that.
Okay, so then my other question to you is, I mean, I understand it's complex and it's really easy to say, God, that's a lot of money. But
Yeah.
it is a concern for a small community,
Oh, yeah.
the 440 people using, that the 440,000, it's ironic that it's the same number. Is-
One of the things you have to remember, and I guess Julie and I should have talked about this beforehand, but we are still making that, we never quit making that payment into the.
Right, I still set aside.
Right, so I believe the system is gonna make this payment and you're not gonna see that.
It's still, it's just.
I mean, the system is we used to have an RD loan. We paid it off, a couple of years ago, 3 years ago, whatever it was. We never quit making the loan payment. We've been making that payment to a savings account.
Yeah, we've been paying
So-
it to ourselves.
Yeah.
So-
We've been paying it into a capital improvement fund. So now when we do this loan with this payment, it's not gonna cause any rates to go up. We're already have that money set aside.
It's just, it's a lot of.
It just sounds, it's a lot of money, but like I said, also if we gotta keep improving the infrastructure, because down the road, then all of a sudden we have a lagoon problem. You know, and right now our lagoons are in really good shape. We wanna keep them that way, cause that becomes multi-million-dollar projects, so.
So how much is in that capital improvements fund right now?
I do have to.
Off the top of my head, given you the, off the top of my head, I don't.
But I do know, I think.
I'm guessing somewhere in the neighborhood of 50 or 60,000.
And the other part of that is the payment that we've been making to ourselves is pretty much the same payment that we need to make to them if we sign this.
74,000.
Well, it's $1,500 a month or $1,400 a month or whatever it is.
How's that affect your reserve for emergency?
That's already built into it. We're already doing that too. We're already, pretty much everything he's telling you, we're already doing. So don't think that by us doing this, your rates are gonna go up $5 a month. They're not.
Well,
They're,
debt is always a deep hole,
yes.
and it's always best not to have debt. It's always best to have credit instead of debit.
Yeah,
You know what I mean?
but we can't afford 444,000.
Yeah.
So we have to take a little bit of debt to improve the system. So let's turn it back over to him and let him,
Okay.
unless Bob, do you have a quick
Engineering,
question?
the floodproofing, that's what they call NEPA, which is the National Environmental Policy Act. That's required by that. Engineering services, agreement for engineering services will include what they call the EJ/CDC documents. The last page of your handout there has that document on there. That's the current edition. And then the agency concurrence need to be requested following approval of loan or grant. Any changes to the fees or services spelled out in the original agreement must be reflected in an amendment to the agreement and have prior agency concurrence. By signing the letter of intent to meet conditions, you certify that you have procured engineering services through a public announcement and have selected those services based on demonstrated competence and qualifications, the type of services required at a fair and reasonable price. Contract documents and final plans and specs. Last page, what I was talking about, that's the going to be how the disbursements are presented. Let's see, which one's that?
No, that's not it.
Oh,
That's
it's
the
not- it's not-
construction contract documents. that
Okay.
engineer will
Okay.
prepare those.
Okay, contract documents, final plans and specs must comply with our requirements, and the bidding, contract, and construction inspections must be submitted to the agency for concurrence prior to advertising for bids, along with an updated cost estimate. Agency may require an additional updated cost estimate if a significant amount of time elapses between the original submission and advertising for bids. Use of any procurement method other than competitive sealed bids must be requested in writing and approved by the agency. Legal services. Be required to execute legal services agreement with your attorney and bond counsel, if applicable, for any legal work needed in connection with this project. Property rights, basically you need to acquire the property rights necessary to conduct the construction, which includes the right-of-way map, right-of-way easement, right-of-way certificate, and opinion of council relative to the right-of-ways. So it's kind of like a four-step process there. System policies and procedures, conflict of interest policy. The town has to have a conflict of interest policy prior to advertising for the bid. Does the town have a conflict of interest policy?
Yes.
Okay. We need to get a copy of that then before you go to bid. And if you need assistance in it, we can offer assistance with that too. Closing instructions. The agency will prepare closing instructions as soon as the draft bond documents, including rights-of-way documents, have been finalized. Now, closing instructions must be obtained prior to your authorization for you to bid for the project. So there's a lot of work that has to be done between now and February, when you prepare to go to advertise to bid. Construction account, you have to establish a construction account for the funds to flow through. And then funds will be dispersed through electronic means. System users, this letter of conditions is based upon your indication at the application that there will be at least 357 residential users and 39 non-residential users on the existing system when construction is completed. So basically the same size as what it is now. Before the agency can agree to the project being advertised for construction bids, you must certify the number of users indicated in the application are currently using the system or signed up to use the system once it's operational. You have to provide the agency with a written plan on how you will obtain the necessary revenue to adequately cash flow the expected operation, maintenance, debt service, and reserve requirements of the proposed project. So basically that's a budget and cash flow projection. Other funding, prior to advertising for bids, you must provide evidence of applicant contributions and approval for other funding sources. So that's what we said before, you pay off that FRS or SRF debt, okay. Loan in the computer loan, and then that, just show that that's paid off. Proposed operating budget, there's a form out there called the Form RD 442-7 operating budget, or similar format can be used for that. Permits, need to acquire all the permits prior to advertising for bid. Consulting engineer must submit evidence that all applicable permits required prior to construction have been obtained with submission to the agency, the final plans, specifications, and documents. So the final plans and all that have to be reviewed by rural development before you can move forward with the project too. Bid authorization, once all the conditions outlined in this letter have been met, rural development may authorize you to advertise the project for construction bids. So when that letter comes through, that you met all the conditions, and you can go ahead and advertise for bid. And then all parties agree that the closing requirements can be met at a mutually acceptable date before the loan closing will be scheduled. Negotiations, redesign, use of bidding alternatives, rebidding, or other means will be considered prior to commitment of subsequent funding by the agency. Recommendation for award and concurrence of recommendation. After the bid tabulation, the engineer makes a recommendation for award. Owner and an owner's attorney evaluate engineer's recommendation and submit the following to Rural Development Processing Office for concurrence. Written request from the owner to Rural Development, copy of the affidavit of publication and the bid advertisement, certified tabulation of bids, complete copy of the apparent low bidder's bid submittal, and has the requirements there, the engineer's written recommendations to award contract to a specific bidder, including analysis of recommended contractor's ability to perform successfully, statement of requirements and instructions to bidders were met, and thorough documentation of any recommendation to award to other than the low bidder. Requires submittal of all bidders' packages from a recommended bidder down to the apparent low bidder. Requirements prior to start of construction, contract review. Your attorney will certify that the executed contract documents are acceptable. Notice to proceed cannot be issued until the agency has concurred in the construction contracts. And that notice to proceed comes from our office, and it goes to the engineer. Go. Bob?
Yeah, I don't doubt the need for this. I know the system needs constant updating and so forth, and I'm a little bit put off by some of the numbers for the loan part, but I also noticed that your loan is basically all funds expended are first from the loan and then it gets to the grant.
Correct.
Is that correct? So,
That's correct.
I mean, we'll eventually get there, I guess, or
Right.
something like that. I'd also like to ask, because I know that the meeting that was held over at the senior center here a month or two ago, they presented, most of what you're talking about. There's been some changes, but the money and the funding was totally different then. And I think you guys were down for, $217,000 in terms of a loan.
Right.
And they were going to go after the CDBG. And I'm just wondering, is that still going forward, or is that being abandoned in favor of taking this loan?
Community development block grant?
Yes. Because, their terms are much more stringent and almost draconian sometimes in terms of putting a lien on the revenue and so forth, that CDBG doesn't do. So I'm just wondering, is that process been stopped now?
We're kind of switching the funding strategy from using, I don't remember exactly what Aaron presented, but it was, CDBG was going to either be used for the wastewater or the water. We weren't sure exactly. We were going to wait and see what RD came up with.
And initially, we were gonna move forward with CDBG funding, and RD said, hey, we think we can make a great offer. We talked to the mayor about it, and we wanted to make sure that we were ready to go with the CDBG application every way. Essentially, we didn't want to wait for this funding offer and have it turn out that the grant dollars weren't as good and miss out on grant funding potentially for this project. And also, we didn't want to miss out on maybe having an application for another project ready to go in CDBG. So we prepared 2 applications so the town had options, basically. And we decided we'd take a look, see what was the best option for the town and move forward. And so that's why there was 2 public hearings.
Okay, and so at this point, this hearing tonight is basically, this is what we get.
Yeah,
This
so-
is what's going on.
So
and-
this hearing tonight would be to either accept or not accept the letter of conditions outlined by Rural Development.
And what happens if we don't agree to all the conditions here tonight? I thought that the letter of, meeting conditions was basically, being, assessing our ability to pay back whatever it is that we had, and that it wasn't automatic approval. But what you said earlier is that if we sign off on these things tonight, that is approval.
Pretty much so, because the program director's already signed off on it.
Okay.
He's basically said, we get the letter of intent and the request for obligation of funds. You know, he's not gonna turn it down.
Yeah, well, I guess my point is I've seen this for like 4 or 5 days
Yeah.
and gone through it, so it's not automatic. And some of the things you mentioned about the, no rate changes and that there is money available and so forth, I really would have, and I still would feel a lot more comfortable if I could see that in writing too. It makes me feel a little uncomfortable because I don't know if I have enough information. And as I say, I do recognize that the town needs to keep this facility and the infrastructure going. I understand that. And that, I don't have a problem with that, and I know that it's expensive. But I'm just looking at the funding, and it's like, well, of course, a grant is better than a loan anytime, but,
I believe that, just so we're on the same, the RD raised, how much did they raise the total project cost? By RD's,
$108,000.
$108,000, so they raised the price $108, and they are 15 short of what CDBG would probably give us,
Okay.
15,000. So there's so there's a couple numbers you need to know.
Right.
If we went with CDBG, but then we'd have to go get the loan from, where would we get the loan from?
Probably RD maybe,
Or
SRF,
State revolving fund.
or Intercap.
Right.
but you're saying that all that, seeking other funding, sources of funding is, because this is a loan basically, at least in the beginning,
You would have, so you would have a loan on, the CDBG grant dollars for $450,000, that'd be your maximum grant. And what Rural Development's offering here is $435,000. So I think what the mayor's saying is there's a difference in about $15,000 worth of grant funding. The advantage you have by going with this package would be you could still pursue those CDBG funds for another project, perhaps if you wanted to, and not have to wait a cycle, stay on the water side.
Yeah.
Also, it'd get your project moving sooner. And although we've had a lot of success getting CDBG grants in the past, there's no guarantee ever that you would get that grant. We've been successful with them, but you'd have to go through that process. So.
Well, as I say, my understanding is tonight was just to determine if we really wanted to go forward with the application process. But actually what we're doing is we're finishing that process, if I understand correctly.
Right, you're correct.
So, this is really kind of short notice and for.
And what else, it's been said in here before that if you get other grant funds, you'll need to notify us, and it doesn't preclude you from going out.
Right, but these guys are saying that basically that's probably not gonna happen.
We don't know. We don't know either.
So all
So,
they would do would be replace the grant funds that we've offered you.
yeah,
It's grant for grant. So if you went and got $435,000 worth of grant,
Your loan doesn't go away.
the loan doesn't go away.
yeah,
They're not gonna give you the grant anymore.
no.
That's correct, that's correct. Well, what I'm saying is that, we could get another loan, but that loan might be for less.
It might be the higher interest rate too.
And shorter term.
And most of those other loans that we talked about, Intercap and.
And they have higher coverage requirements typically than
Yeah.
the 1 So when they talk about having a 10% coverage requirements for basically a reserve account for repairs or things that go wrong, some of the other programs, that coverage requirement can be as high as 25%.
You guys are already doing that anyway, though, right?
Right,
Yeah.
and the loan terms on those other loans, though, if we went Intercap or if we went state revolving fund, those are shorter terms though, aren't they?
They're 20-year terms and this is a 40-year term.
Yeah, so the payment would be almost twice as high, and then we would have to start looking at, then we would have to start looking at raising rates to cover that. Right now, we have the money for their program.
I mean, part of what we're trying to do is maximize grant dollars for the town and find what's the best deal for the town.
Yeah.
And being the fact that the funding available, your grant packages are so close, $15,000, given the fact that you have the longer term and lower interest rate, we feel this is in the town's best interest, this funding package versus the alternatives. Financially. So.
And who is it that's really required this 500-year floodplain? I mean,
That's the EPA.
that's EPA, that's a federal requirement?
Yeah, that's not us.
Executive order from
That's,
several years ago.
I'm just thinking, by then, we'll have rocket ships taking it all off the planet or something like that. But that's a requirement.
That's a requirement, yeah.
I think that all came around with all the flooding like in New Orleans and all that. That's when I think FEMA, EPA, and all those really got tough on making your infrastructure things bomb-proof for those type of things, so they can come back online quicker after that flood's over. you can just come back online instead of having to replace everything because it's been flooded.
The other thing this does, it allows you
That'd be a good way to upgrade the system.
This allows you to get the project moving into a point where you can hit a competitive bidding window through the winter and early next spring. If you're to wait for CDBG funding, most likely those funds wouldn't be available at best until October or perhaps later. And then all of a sudden, trying to get through this and get this out to bid on that short turnaround could be difficult. And so you may be looking at a bidding time frame where you're slipping into later in the year, where contractors may not be as hungry and you may not be as good at pricing.
I guess I'm also taking into account the fact that the economic situation in the world is a little dicey at this point.
Sure.
And with, a revenue lien and so forth, how would that, I mean, if you guys, if you go ahead, I mean, anything could happen, but, that would tend to put us out of sorts also, wouldn't it?
As opposed to what option, I guess?
Well, I guess.
The other loans are gonna put a lien on us too, though. We're always gonna have a lien on us if we borrow money, so I mean, that's just a moot point. Whether it be SRF or whether it be Intercap, they're still gonna put a lien on the system of some sort.
Sure.
I wanted to explain earlier that the reason why I said 240 users is because Jerry, a guy who works here, told me 440 earlier, but apparently it's only 398 according to your figures, so.
Well,
I
398
wanted to correct
Plus the.
commercial users.
Right.
Which is another almost 40 users, so.
So they're differentiating between residential and commercial.
Right, because the commercial users tend to use more water than a residential unit, so.
So when they talk EDUs, when they talk dwelling units, a commercial user gets more EDUs, because they use, like the school uses way more water than you do, so we can't do one for one. The school is so many more EDUs than you are, so we're doing the.
Thought I added those figures together, the two that you mentioned, 39 commercial plus the other, and it came to 498. Or between 398, yeah.
And that could have been from.
And that was with the work that Jeff helped out.
And that could have been a year ago's numbers, because we've had.
Getting the information from 2015, best data we had, to get the EDUs correct, because that really drives also in the underwriting process, how much loan that we offer and how much grant. And if you have way more EDUs, then by God, you're gonna have to pay more in loans if you have more EDUs. If you have less EDUs, then obviously you can't afford the loan. So lowers the loan and increases the grant, so let's keep rolling. Trees are off, okay. Resident inspector, if you decide to have a resident inspector, you need to have a.
They don't get to decide.
They have to have one. Okay, so we need a resume of the resident inspector. Normally it's engineer.
Appointed by, recommended by, or employed by the engineer.
Okay. So yeah, the residential inspector will need a resume on them. That'll be appointed by the engineers, I guess. Pre-construction conference, be held prior to the issuance of the notice to proceed. Consulting engineer will review the plan development with the agency, owner, resident inspector, attorney, and contractor, and other funders, and other interested parties, and provide minutes of this meeting to the agency. Final rights of way, basically if there's any rights of way that need to be obtained, we'll need to get those done before the notice to proceed is issued. Insurance and bonding requirements, prior to the start of construction or loan closing, whichever occurs first, you must acquire and submit to the agency proof types of insurance and bond coverage for the borrower shown below. General liability insurance, workers' comp, and fidelity or employee dishonesty bonds. And basically what that is, that's just the declaration page from the insurance policy. The biggest one we tend to have an issue with is the fidelity or employee dishonesty bonds. And that isn't really clearly explained sometimes on the declaration page. So, national flood insurance. Now, if the project involves acquisition or construction in designated special flood or mudslide prone areas, you must purchase a flood insurance policy at the time of loan closing. Real property insurance, fire and extended coverage normally be maintained on all structures except reservoirs, pipelines, and other structures. And the agency will be listed as mortgagee on the policy. Construction and post-construction requirements, vulnerability assessment and emergency response plan. These are basically done by third party. Those come back, they're confidential, and all we need to do is have a statement from, or whatever, certification that you've had that completed, kind of list the specifics, who did it, date, and those are due every 3 years. Other requirements, system for award management, we got that straightened out. This is something that has taken place over about 3 years ago. It changed where you could just list one, no one. And now you have to have a specific person listed on that system for award management. And you need to keep that in effect until the grant's completely expended. Litigation, you're required to notify the agency within 30 days of receiving notification of being involved in any type of litigation prior to loan closing or the start of construction, whichever occurs first. Certified operators, you have to maintain evidence. Your system will be, will have or be, have a certified operator available prior to the system becoming operational. I guess Ruben's the one?
Yeah, both employees are certified.
Okay. Inspections, agency requires pre-construction conference, pre-final and final inspections and warranty inspection. The pre-construction conference we already talked about. Pre-final will be like about close to about a month before they're all done.
That's substantial completion.
Yeah, substantial completion of the project. Develop our punch list of what needs to be corrected. And we'll do the final inspection. And then we'll do a warranty inspection about 11 months after that. And which will, and then we do it 11 months because normally the 12-month warranty period. And this gives the town time to file any corrections that need to be made or adjustments that have to be made. And then every year you'll have the reports to complete, and then every 3 years we'll be out here just taking a quick look at the system. Do you have a question?
Yeah, this is mostly for Randy, I guess. That lagoon, is that located on tribal land?
No.
Very good, thank you.
Okay. Change orders, prior to agency concurrence is required on all change orders. This is after the construction starts and the contractor decides, hey, I need another 5 days to finish this. Well, he's got to submit a change order through the engineer to justify why he needs those extra 5 days. Okay. Payments, agency concurrence is required for all invoices and partial payment requests before project funds will be released. Basically, a 1 month monthly draws is what we do. And then the next item is the payments. We'll need to have the EJCDC, which is that last page, Exhibit B in the letter of conditions. That's the form that will be submitted. Do we also use that outlay report too?
No.
Okay.
That's just for us.
So we'll use the engineer's documents that they draft up to us for payment, and then we'll do the EJCDC document, and then we'll request the funds. Use of remaining funds, applicant contribution and connection or tap fees will be the first funds expended for the project, followed by non-agency funds, and then, as we talked about previously, how that's going to work. Remaining funds may be used for eligible loan and grant purposes, provided the use will not result in major changes to the original scope of work or purpose of the loan and grant remains the same. So if there's, additional work that could be done while they're here, we can do that. Agency loan funds that are not needed will be applied as an extra payment on agency indebtedness unless other disposition is required by the bond ordinance. Basically what that means is, say you use only $400,000 of the loan funds. The additional $40,000 will be used to reduce the loan. Okay, and then that'll also reduce the payment, won't it? Or that'll just the payment, or just the, just the amount, okay. Grant funds not expended for authorized purposes will be canceled within 60 days of final completion of the project. So that's why that final inspection is very important. Make sure we've got everything done. Prepayment and extra payments. Prepayments of scheduled installments can be made at any time at the option of the borrower with no penalty. Graduation, this is a requirement that we have after 5 years of loan. Then it will be evaluated every 2 to 3 years. And, pardon?
Yeah.
Okay. And then what happens there is they determine, they have an interest rate that they benchmark that against, so those above this mark, we have to review. Below that, we don't really have to review, they're not eligible for graduation, because it actually benefits those with a higher interest rate to refinance through another program, to reduce their payments, and provide more liquidity to the town or the community. Okay. Security operational inspections, agency, like I mentioned before, every 3 years we'll be out here to do a physical inspection and do the records management system and conflict of interest policy review every 3 years for the life of the loan. Annual report, audit requirements, required to submit an annual report at the end of each fiscal year. Annual report will be certified by the appropriate organization official and consist of financial information and a rate schedule. Financial statements must be prepared on an accrual basis according to GAAP, which is generally accepted accounting principles. Must include at a minimum a balance sheet and income and expense statement. Annual report will include separate reporting for each water and waste disposal facility and itemized cash accounts by type, debt service, etc. And you'll have to retain those books for 3 years after the issuance of the annual report. Now, these annual reports have to be signed by the appropriate borrower official and submitted within 60 days of your fiscal year end. Yours is what, June 30th? So I have a lot of them due on August 30th. And on September 1st, I pick up the phone and I start calling. And don't worry.
I'm not
me.
worried, I'll be retired by then.
I'm
not worried at all.
Okay, audits. All audits are to be performed. Now, let's see.
They're only gonna have to do one audit.
Yeah.
The year they received the $750,000
Right.
in federal assistance.
Right, because you have a single audit, and it's already in that budget that we talked about. And that's because you're getting more than $750,000 in federal financial assistance. So, financial statements, you spend less than $750,000 in federal financial assistance. You must submit financial statements in lieu of the audit, which includes a minimum, there's a couple of forms in there, the 442-2, statement of budget, income and equity, and the balance sheet. Insurance, be required to maintain your insurance on the facility employees for the life of the loan. Statutory and national policy requirements. Basically, we get down to civil rates.
Yeah, you can let them read through that.
Yeah.
I think we probably ought to address any final questions and see if there's, take a look at the loan resolution, the letter of intent and the request.
Yeah.
Randy?
Anyone have any questions for them?
You mentioned that one of the only issues you usually have is something to do with employee fidelity insurance. You didn't explain why that's an issue.
Because it's not clearly defined. It may be included on the policy as employee, you may see something other than theft or something like that. But a lot of times it's not disclosed correctly or disclosed, out in the open and says, this is employee theft or dishonesty insurance. It's covered under a different coverage or binder that comes under, or rider, I should say, that comes under this attachment on the insurance. So
It's an endorsement?
most of the times it is, yes.
It's a liability.
Yeah,
We carry it.
because a bond can be rather expensive. If you go from getting one bond for this project and then, hey, you need another bond for something else. A lot of times, before you know it, you spent, $1,500 for bonds, and you could have got your binder, your rider on the policy for maybe $40 a year. So
Let's go ahead and turn it back to Randy
Yeah.
and see what he's.
Okay. Anyone have any questions for the engineers on the project itself, since they're here? Go ahead.
Jeff, I would like to know if you have, in your research and what you do, have considered the installation of an alternative energy production facility, either in replacing the facility for sewage that you have now, or as a side-by-side facility, because of the hot water as part of the offload from the existing hot springs facilities that are offered here, where an anaerobic digester plant, usually one of the big drawing cards or stumbling blocks against putting one in is the cold temperature in the winter, that the bacteria need to be worked at about 65 to 75 degrees, and the water coming out of the hot springs that are here could be used to turn the sewage into a money-making facility. Dairyland in Wisconsin has installed, this was years back in my research, over 200 at that time facilities for prisons, for cities, for whomever would want one. And regardless of the size, they all make money converting the sewage sludge into fertilizer, but as well as collecting the methane gas, which is almost identical to natural gas, for energy production, where they could be running much of the city's vehicles, the police vehicles on it. It could be just used on site for electric generation and fed back into the stream. Did your team of engineers research at all the feasibility of utilizing the hot water here and making money with it?
We did not, no.
We have, the town has done that we have looked into that, with a group. Paul had a group here, and we talked to them, but we have a lagoon system. Most of them are mechanical systems that are doing that. It's a completely different sewage treatment plant that does that, different design.
So you have the cost of constructing that plant. The other thing you'll run into here, because there are some plants around the state that will treat their sludge to sell it for mulch, land application, things like that. And what we found, I believe it was Darby or Hamilton, watched when I was at, there's an increase in maintenance cost, and you have to have a market for it. And there's not a great market for it in Montana. And so by the time you account for your increase in maintenance costs, you're basically giving the stuff away.
But I am referring mostly to the utilization of it for methane production, where the methane is captured and then sold. This is like missing the boat, it seems.
They capture that in mechanical plants like Randy was
Yeah,
talking about all the
different-
time.
Right.
Sometimes you see it burning off of the top. This is a lagoon, so you can't collect
Right,
it.
but it would also be a source for grant funding for alternative energy production. And rather than having to get tied up in a mess like this with the USDA riding herd on every move for the life of the loan, and having to concur with the city on almost every move that's made. It just seemed like it was something that maybe needed to be considered.
Yeah, the town has looked into that before. We're looking at that. The first problem is we have to build a whole new facility. The lagoon system is not designed to do that. You have to move to a mechanical plant. It's a completely different style of system. So we'd have to build a whole new facility, and then we could do that.
It would maybe only need to have hot water pipes laid underneath and then new bags inserted in your already existing lagoon.
But we have too much infiltration water is part of the problem. And that's where the guys that came, and they were a company that did that, and they even did, the same company does algae, they do the algae grows and they do all that, and they looked at the system, and then the biggest thing they saw right away is too much infiltration water. You know, we're putting 60,000 gallons of fresh water, 60 to 80,000 gallons of fresh water into the system a day, and even on a slow day, our system's putting out 180,000 gallons of water. I mean, that's how much infiltration we're having. Like I talked about, days where we have close to 1 million gallons in infiltration water, and there's not enough. It's so diluted that you can't do nothing about it. our lagoon system is actually, the lagoons themselves as, how they're working are, they're supposed to be done in 30 years, and ours only have a foot of sludge, and they should have 4 feet of sludge. They don't have a foot, and they're over 30 years old. So that's how much infiltration water is coming through, and that's, when we looked at that system, that's one of the problems, is you gotta somehow get the infiltration water out and just be dealing with the sewer. So if you were at a, say, a prison facility or something where everything's in good piping, it's a huge concentrated deal, it's gonna work really well, because you actually have concentrations of sewer that you can pull the methane off of and do all that, and the hot water and everything you said is correct. It's just, this system just isn't there yet, it's just not there. I mean, like I said, we have looked at it quite extensively. There was some, I can't remember that, it's been a few years ago, but I mean, there were some guys that came in, and I believe they're doing some stuff in Whitefish right now with algae grows. They do huge algae grows, doing some different things, using algae for stuff. This company does things worldwide. I believe they're using algae for doing cleaning up, like fuel spills and stuff. And so, and they came and looked at it, and it just wasn't feasible right now for us, so.
Is anything in the proposal that you have before you for the scrubbing of heavy metals as well as the medications that would be going?
Not yet, no.
I think it's the depression cycle rate, the world depression cycle rate is supposed to hit in December of the 25th of this year. So that's another going to be a crashing situation that you probably wouldn't, if you had something set up like that, it wouldn't work anyway, because we'd all be in depression. Theoretically, that's what's supposed to happen.
Okay. Do we have any other questions? Council have any questions for anybody?
I understand this loan's gonna be like a 40-year loan, and I'm wondering if over the course of that 40 years, if the USDA is gonna have any say on setting our water and sewer rates for that 40 years?
Well,
40-year period.
they kind of do, but also the state of Montana does. Our water and our sewer are both enterprise funds by MCA code. And by code, they have to turn a profit. It's Montana state law. So they can't operate under budget. They have to turn a profit. So, and that's part of what they talk about here. And one of the nice things about what they kind of, part of what they talk about when they start talking about, when you said, I don't remember the percentages now, where they make us have reserve funds. So when a pump goes down, we have the money. This is what happens in these small systems, and is we operate, this is what cost operates, that's what we're gonna charge. And they don't have any reserves. So then when a pump goes down, and we're talking big grinder pumps, I think we got price on one at the lift station, I think it was $20,000 for a pump. And the pump, the impeller, and all that, and of course you have to have an electrician install it and all that. So we're talking $20,000. Well, if you're operating right at your limit with no reserves, and that pump goes down, what do? Well, you gotta go borrow the money somewhere and pass it on to the user. So if you're saving that money though, putting $5 a month away, and pretty soon that pump goes down, oh, we have the money to do it. And that's what we've been doing on the sewer system. The sewer system, because the previous loan was with the USDA. They had that same setup, and we have continued on with it. Even though the loan's been paid off, we have continued setting those funds aside. So in a time, because we knew, Julie and I talked about this, and I knew that there was gonna be a time when we're gonna borrow money again. Well, we're already putting that money away, so that's already in our budget. We already have that money to spend on the project to help make the infrastructure better. And so that's why we're moving forward with this. It is a lot of money, but it's, it's what it costs. It's expensive to do business today, and that's just one of the problems. One of the things you gotta remember, we're not homeowners, we're not going out and digging our own line and throwing it in. We have to do it, that has to meet lots of regulations. We fall under, like I mentioned before, we fall under EPA, which the tribe, the Confederated Salish and Kootenai Tribes, has actual certified EPA inspectors on the sewer side of it. They're in joint with them, so they come and inspect the system. We send them all the reports. We do everything with the tribes that we can, and the EPA oversees all that on the sewer system. So there's some of these things that it helps protect the waterways also. I mean, part of the clean water, we all want to have clean water. Well, we don't want to be dumping our sewer into someone else's water system. We want to have it clean. you know, I'm not saying I will, but I would for you guys. I would drink a glass of water coming out of our lagoon system tonight. It's not that, there's a little particulate in it, there's a little particulate, you know, you run it through a coffee filter first. Just take the paper out, but, I mean, you know, and that's what we wanna do, is we wanna put that water into the system that you could actually, you know, yeah, it's sewer water, but it's not gonna hurt you, and that's what we wanna do, is put the water into the system that's not gonna hurt anything. So the animals, the, you know, the fish, the frogs, the beavers, the, you know, the protected animals or any of that, we want to be able to discharge clean water out into the Hot Springs Creek, so.
Adolf Coors said that one time. Sales were down 10%. People thought he was actually using it.
You have a sewer plant operator right now working.
We have two. Both the public works employees are certified operators.
Oh, that's good.
And they continue, one of the requirements with that is they're continually going to training. They have to have so many hours of training every year, and so they're continually going to classes, either put on by the state or the EPA or, you know, different organizations, so. If there's no other questions, let's.
I was just gonna say, I got a lot of people contacting me, and of course, the biggest concern was here in the poorest town, in the poorest county in the state, where people have low income or fixed income or no income. And so the biggest concern, of course, was how is this gonna affect the rates? And you've given assurances that there is money available, and I would ask if you could put that in a document so that, you know, I could show that, we can show where's the money, where the money's coming from, and so forth, because I say like you, I mean, they were bothering me relentlessly.
Oh, and that's, I mean, for all of us, you know, me included, I mean, you know, why would I wanna raise my rates or anyone else's? And then that's one of the things we looked at that, just like we talked about when we talked about the, you know, phase 3 of the water system too, when we talked about that, is the money's there for that, it's not gonna affect rates at all. And that's why we're doing this, is those rates are there and the money's there, and that's what we're putting towards. And that's why I said when Julie and I first, when that loan came due, instead of lowering rates, we went ahead and put that money in it. And that money's been there to do other things. And we've had some breakdowns, just like the chlorination system actually failed a few years ago. The previous engineers, it wasn't this group of engineers, wanted $350,000 for a chlorine building. Well, we did our own. And ended up with some help with this engineering firm, because they were in that transition, but then we ended up doing it for $12,000, $15,000, but we had the money in the account. We just paid it, we're up and running again, and we got the chlorination system. One of the things like the sewer camera, we're having a lot of trouble with the sewer lines and not knowing what's underground. I mean, you're just blindly putting stuff down there, so we bought the sewer camera, which was another $14,000, whatever the camera was. I mean, we had the money to do that, and that's what those funds are for, and it hopefully we better the system by that, and that's why, so that's not a problem putting those numbers on paper, because we have the numbers, it's in the budget, it's in your, you know, in your financials every month and all that, it's there, that's not a problem, that's so everyone's.
Goes a long way with people.
Oh yeah, I mean, and that's, you know, we're not sneaking nothing in the next month going, oh, by the way, we have to raise your rates $5 or $10 or $20, you know, it's, so that's where we're at, so. That doesn't mean down the road a couple of years we might have to relook at this. I mean rates, because things change. But so far, right now, we're actually doing very well on the rate side of it. So, you know, it doesn't say that Mission Valley Power raises our power rate. Well, you know, it's when the expenses then jumps up, well, we gotta look at everything. And we normally, I believe, December we ran through rates.
Right.
Was that he came, so I mean, so we try and do that every year. We run through rates, we look at what it costs, we look at what we can do, and we look at what we have to do, and we just keep on top of that.
Yeah.
So, if there's no other questions, we'll go on down through the, our agenda here. Need to do an action to adopt the letter of intent to meet conditions.
I do have questions.
Okay.
Because the project description is, you know, it doesn't really describe, it doesn't itemize how much different things are gonna cost, or if, you know, I rehabilitate existing collection lines, so is that collection lines, do they originate, the ones that originate from the sewer lines that are coming out of the house?
Those are the mains, no, we will not go on your property, because what we'll do is, it's just like, what they did, I'll give Bob a map, but I don't have my maps here. On the south side of town, they rehabilitated the sewer mains in '99 or whatever it was. They go in and they put in a liner, and then they go back and they put new service line from the city property to the homeowner's property. But from then on, it's still the homeowner's line. So what they do is they go in and line it, and then
I thought we had that put in when, and that sewer.
only on the south side of town, the north side of town wasn't done. There's a whole bunch of it not done. I did some maps for Bob, I don't have them with me, I have more.
I have them, I digitize them too.
Oh, okay. I mean, so we can go over that, Mary, and show, but there's a bunch of them, and what's interesting is the ones that they did not do are the ones down on the creek. I mean, so we got a lot of them on the creek bottom, and those are the main mains. The main for the north side of town actually parallels the creek all the way to the sewer lagoons, and that's where it's picking up a lot of that infiltration water. You know, just because you're in the bottom of the creek, so it's picking that water up. So when they'll go in and reline them, one of the other things they talk about is the manholes I talked about from the top clear to the bottom, what they call the chimney. Those are all broken. I mean, they were put in the 50s and they're just getting old and cracked. Well, they'll go in and repair them so that water can't come in those places too. So.
Are those collection lines the lines from the edge of the homeowner's property to the main line out in the street?
No, a collection line will be the one down the alley. They run down mostly down the alleys. There's a few of them in the streets, but then all your houses come into the collection line. So we're collecting from the houses into a main, then taking it out. So, and then most of them are a clay tile line. So of course, over 40 years, 50 years, 60 years of being in the ground, they have moved, cracked, broke. What they did in a lot of spots, actually they just found one the other day, they dug it up because there was a bunch of roots in it. And what it was, they put in tees. Every place they thought, when they put the line in, because they didn't allow vacant lots and a lot of stuff, so they put in these tees, and a lot of them they just stuck a board over. Well, what happens in 60 years with wood in the ground? So those are some of those things, and that's what they just found the other day. Roots were growing in it, they had to dig it up. They took that out, and what they ended up doing is they sealed it and poured concrete back over it so that can't happen again. But that's one of the things when you do the line rehabilitation, when they take and put the liner in it, those things are sealed. Then you're not getting that infiltration water in from all those cracks or spots where they stubbed a line out for a lot and it's never been hooked up. So now stuff's growing in it. And so a couple of things it will do is, of course, it doesn't stop the roots. It stops the roots in our lines, but it doesn't stop the root in the homeowner's line. That was one we just did a couple days ago too, was the homeowner's line. The roots grew down their line and into our line. So, and the homeowner worked with us and we dug it all up and they replaced part of their line too. So we got all that cleaned up, so.
Are you putting in surge suppressors for the homeowner's protection as you go?
No. Most of the stuff has enough depth, there's enough elevation drop that's not a problem. Public Works is what they do is when they're out working on lines and stuff, they identify that. They just identified one just a couple months ago and contacted the homeowner, and the homeowner at their own expense installed one. They hadn't had any trouble there yet, but it was a place where the Public Works Department thought there could be a problem, so they notified the homeowner and they put one in. What she's talking about is a check valve in your sewer line so that sewer can't back up into your house. Most of the places in town, there's enough elevation. A lot of places in town, the sewer lines are over 20 feet deep, so there's plenty of drop. You know, it's a gravity flow system, so when you got hills and stuff, they try to keep it on a gravity, so there's places where the sewer lines are 16 to 20 feet deep. A lot of them are 12, you know, all over town. I mean, they're fairly deep, so it's where you start worrying about that is when the sewer line's getting down about that same level as a house, where it could actually back up and cause a problem. And
the reason why that's a huge concern is because standard exclusion in homeowners says that backup is not covered. I know I used to be an insurance adjuster. Overflow, if your toilet overflows, it's covered. But if it backs up, it's not covered, and it can be very expensive.
And it can be, and part of the town has some coverage in that too, through its policy for the homeowner too. So, but that's one of the reasons why we We did the handouts, and you probably heard me say it meeting after meeting after meeting, if you think there's a problem, let us know, so we can come out with the camera. We can camera the line, or if we need to jet it, we can jet it. What happens is it get roots in the line, well, then it backs up and causes the problems in the homeowners, houses. So if we can stay on top of that, and that's what we try and do, is stay on top of the problem. Why don't we fix it before there's a problem, is what we're trying to do. So, and that's same with this whole project. Let's fix it before we have a problem instead of being behind on it, so. Julie? So we need to do each one of these?
I believe so, Dan.
So we need council action to adopt a letter of intent to meet conditions. Do I have a motion?
I move we adopt the letter of intent.
Do I have a second?
Second.
Any council discussion?
I think Bob actually asked all the questions that I had thought of as well. Thanks, newbie. Yeah, well, and it is a concern, taking on that much debt. One of my questions is, the previous sewer restoration that we had in '99, was that a RD loan as well, or? I know the water system was CBDG, but.
I know we had the,
SRF?
because we did have to retire one of those and then we just
Refinanced it at a lower rate.
Right, we refinanced it through them, SRF, at a lower rate.
Yeah,
So.
and that saved us some money, because I was here when we did
Yeah, and
that.
by the way, the balance of that right now, I believe, is less than $50,000.
Okay,
So it's not a huge balance. It might be 40, actually.
okay.
It only has 4 years left on the loan, so it will be good.
Okay. Any other council discussion? No other council discussion? All in favor to adopt? Aye.
Aye.
Is it 4 of you?
Mary?
No, I'm voting no.
Okay. Request the obligation of funds. Do I have a motion?
I move we request the obligation of funds.
Second.
The motion's been made and seconded. Any council discussion? No council discussion. All in favor? Aye.
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 No.
Okay,
3 ayes.
3 ayes, thank you.
1 nay. Motion to adopt the loan resolution.
I move we adopt the loan resolution.
Do I have a second?
Second.
Motion been made and seconded. Any council discussion? Hearing no council discussion. All in favor? Aye.
Aye.
No.
3-1 again.
Motion to review the grant agreement.
So, that's just really a
Oh,
discussion.
okay.
Oh, yeah, where that was.
Oh, we
was
did that.
like-
We're done.
And over.
What we
Any
will need
other-
to do is record the vote on here and have you and Julie.
Okay. Is there any other public comment? Yes, Jerry.
Yeah, I'd like to applaud you for being fully aware of the water and sewer systems, and yet analyzing 400 and some complaints from citizens all the time, and I think you're doing a good job, as for the council.
Thank you.
Thank you, Jerry.
Thank you, Jerry. And when you get your new house?
Go tell council, go ask council.
Well, we located, I think we're supposedly we're ready to go on hookups. They came and we talked to them and I thought one of them was for you. You're gonna move up into the old forestry
Yeah,
complex, right?
But the thing I want to do, see, I want to talk to you people and them, and I want to see what kind of trailer I'm getting, how big it is, and I've got the spot picked up where I want it, but you've got the water lines up a little further, and I don't know how we're gonna resolve that.
Was bringing a backhoe and we'll bring it to you, no problem.
I'm moving tomorrow if I could.
Yeah, I know housing came over and I know Ruben went and looked at them and they turned water on and checked spots and so.
They
so
did mow it all out too, so.
So yeah, they should be.
They're looking at it anyway.
Yep, they're moving forward anyways for you. Thanks for coming, Jerry. No other discussion, motion to adjourn?
I move we adjourn.
Motion been made, second, all in favor, aye. Opposed?
Thank you. You did a great job.
Thank you. Oh, just one time.